What's up, everyone? Thralls of Metal back again. I am Shredlord.
Necrotic Nick.
And we are here to bring you another excellent album review. This time, we are bringing you Symphonic Metaller's Cradle of Filth. Yes, that's right, Cradle of Filth, with their brand new 2025 release, The Screaming of Valkyries.
It's definitely some screaming on here. Anyway, this also comes out on the 21st of March on Napalm Records. Actually, the band's first album with Napalm Records since they shifted over from Nuclear Blast. This band formed in 1991 in England. This is their 16th album overall, I believe. I think there's maybe one re-recording in there, but fuck it. It's their 16th album. I went over the last album, 2021's Existence is Futile, and I thought it was musically pretty decent. And yeah, we recently brought up this band in a video about, well, bands with vocalists that are kind of deal breakers, and believe me, we will get to that. But yeah, this is a long-running act that, I mean, they kind of have their own little niche in extreme metal. Like, you know, they start up as kind of death metal and then black metal, blackened death metal. Now the archives calls them extreme gothic metal. Fine.
Sure.
Let's just call him that. And at the helm of this band, as always, is one Danny Filth, which, believe me, he will be brought up a lot on this.
Because you either love him or you hate him. There's no in between on the vocals. You're either in for the ride or you want to get off.
He's too present in the albums to be like indifferent to him. Like it's not one of those where like, oh, he's just kind of buried in the background. I can get past it. No, Danny's right up front, shrieking about vampires and shit right at you. So you either love him or hate him. And, well, I mean, if you watch the one video, you kind of know where I sit. But musically, I've never really had a problem with this band. Honestly, I think they do a really good job of kind of bridging a lot of different genres on here. The opening track on here, To Live Deliciously, which sounded like the title of a Food Network show with like Alton Brown or something. It kind of comes in thrashy. Like right away, you get machine gun riffs, thrashy gallops. The drums are pounding. It's got like some urgency, some really solid, catchy, thrashy riffs. Like across the board throughout this entire song. And throughout this album, you'll hear elements of death metal, elements of classic heavy metal, and yeah, there's still some black metal left in this band. And they do a pretty good job of kind of weaving back and forth between the styles. So yeah, musically, never really had an issue. But then Danny comes in and then he does his thing, which, to his credit, he has a pretty impressive range for doing this as long as he has been. And yeah, he's got a multitude of different voices that he uses that are appealing to some. I struggle finding particular ones that I like.
With his vocals, it's kind of like the paintbrush analogy. He paints with a few different brushes, but there's a certain brush stroke that he uses that a lot of people don't appreciate. I feel like one of them. There's a lot of the album where I feel like the vocals are fine, but really let's just call it what it is. It's the shrilly, shrieky stuff that really just kind of bothers me in a sense, because it almost feels like someone stapled his nuts to the floor and that's the instant reaction.
Yeah, like someone needs to just quit startling Danny in the studio, because I feel like that's the noise he makes. Either that or they were like continuously pushing goblins off of a fucking cliff and recording it, because that shrill vocal thing, it's still all over here. Though not as present as it was in the last one, I do feel like he kind of dialed it back a bit. But again, musically, I still think there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. You know, a lot of just fun melodies and such. And again, like alternating between like melancholic, gothic dreariness to like very lively, very, you know, upbeat, kind of thrashy tunes.
So tracks like White Hellebore, if that's even how you pronounce it, I don't know.
Never seen that word before.
Really showcase kind of some of the old black metal that they used to have in their sound. Although, at first it didn't sound evil enough for me. At the end, it kind of resolved itself. There's even like moments where you kind of think, maybe even dissection a bit, which is kind of weird. I didn't really think that at first, but then I could see it.
I got that more on like some of the longer tracks, which, all right, to be fair, a lot of these tracks are longer. Like I think most of them are at least over 5 minutes, and you have a couple of 7-minute ones. But honestly, the 7-minute songs, You Are My Nautilus, I don't know if that's like a ode to Nemo's ship or sea creatures, whatever. It's an odd compliment to give a lady. And Ex Sanguine Draculae. These two songs in particular, I think, are giant standouts. Longer songs with lots of riff changes, and the black metal like energy really comes out of them. And I did hear like dissection level stuff in there, like, you know, very cold, icy melodies, but very hooky. Like a lot of classic heavy metal sort of like injected in them. You get great lead harmonies, really ripping solos, and a good sense of dynamics. And within there, I would say Danny does a good job of like kind of navigating it, because it does feel like there are like longer stories. He does have like kind of a storytelling aspect to his lyrics, but the music definitely follows suit in terms of like, you know, the peaks and valleys in a story. And I think the songwriting on those two songs in particular, honestly, it's really, really good.
Now, one thing we did notice with this album is there's a couple of elements of this band that seem kind of, they're still there, but very much in the background. And I think that would be the symphonic elements. And then in a lot of the albums, they have that female vocalist where they'd have a lot of female vocals accompanying Danny as well.
Yep.
This album had some of the female vocals. I believe they have a new female vocalist.
Yep.
But they were very few spots. One of the big spots was non-ominous Moriar. And if you say that in a mirror 3 times, Danny Filth will come out and screech at you for an hour. The end has the female vocals, and it's almost like a symphonic gothic ballad in a way. There's times where I almost could just close my eyes and take Danny's voice out and put Peter Steele's smooth, sultry voice, lighting a patchouli candle while dripping hot wax all over my nipples. I'm sorry. Did I speak out loud?
Really detailed, really quick.
But anyway, I digress. My original point is while it did have those symphonic and those female vocal elements, they absolutely were not as prevalent as they've been in past albums.
And her delivery is a little bit different. Like, it's still good. Like, she can definitely sing. And that's definitely a prerequisite for joining this band. Like, you know, the female vocals are pretty well noted, and he's had a lot of excellent singers in the past. But she doesn't have, like, the big operatic flair as, like, some of the past singers. So her vocals are a little bit more kind of in the background. Like, they almost kind of blend in with the atmosphere and the synths on here. But they do kind of give it like a little bit of extra melody. But I don't think they pick their spots as well. Like, she has a couple of chorus moments where, you know, it kind of works for what it is. It may not necessarily be my thing, but it delivers a good melodic hook. But in other instances where a good melodic hook could definitely have been utilized a little bit more, or just, I don't know, like fine-tuned. Malignant Perfection. That song has a big anchor chorus. It repeats a lot. And rather than like going for something like way more tuneful and way more catchy, they let Danny take the helm. And granted, they do a lot of layering with his vocals and such. Like, he's doing like, you know, 2, maybe 3 different growls on there to kind of like generate something that is a little bit more in key. But it doesn't generate like probably the big hook that I think that song kind of needs, because it's definitely a more melodic track. It definitely wants to appeal to the more like gothic metal side. Like, it's not doing a lot of big death metal stuff or black metal stuff. Well, all right, they're not doing a lot of black metal stuff up into the bridge where it does go full bore black metal, but it goes back to that chorus eventually, and it just doesn't land the hook because he's doing, again, his vocal things. Like, it's hard to describe his vocals because they're not traditionally like black metal vocals. They're not death metal vocals. They're almost like narration. Like, he sounds like he's mostly speaking all of them, because the only notes that he seems like he really draws out are those fucking baby screams, which drives me nuts. Like, there's a couple of low roars that he'll sustain, but a lot of it is very sharp, very just kind of like fast-paced vocals, especially in the thrashier sections. But it feels more like, I don't know, like he's reading lines.
Borderline rapping.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of that on Demagoguery. He does a fast vocal cadence on there over a very like mid-tempo groove. He even got like the dinner bell ride on there. The riff is banging, solid. But he comes in and it's just kind of off. Now, later in the song, they do a thrashy gallop behind it, like a strip D beat, and it sounds like German thrash. Like, you could have plucked that moment off of a Creator or a Destruction album. And it works there. But over the groove, it just sounds odd.
The main thing that I took away from this album, as far as musically goes, is it is very guitar and drum driven. The guitarists and the drummers should get Gold Star Awards, because the riffs were aplenty. They were great in many different styles, and the songwriting, once again, for the most part, was really good and really well paced. I would say sometimes the songs felt a little long. There were certain times where I felt like songs could have ended sooner, as opposed to just kind of dragging out certain sections. But I think sometimes that just comes with that territory of trying to be epic. You know, you have the big slow builds and things like that. You had weird endings sometimes, and I wouldn't say weird. They're just elongated. Like one of the tracks is just like outside noise for 30 seconds. One's just like water filling up Danny's little bucket for his bathtub or something. Sometimes the attempt to be atmospheric felt a little overdone, especially at the end of the tracks. We don't need 40 seconds of noise at the end of each track. That felt a little overdone.
And there's also like points where they kind of like dip out everything except for the synths, and then Danny does like a transitional narration into the next part. And I feel like a lot of that could have been dropped out. Like it feels like, again, like a unnecessary like thespian sort of quality. Like you don't need to like ham it up like it's Shakespeare in the Park between all these moments. But again, when the music clicks back on, generally it's pretty awesome. Like the Trinity of Shadows, I really enjoyed that song, mainly because, man, that feels like an evil Iron Maiden song. Lots of galloping rhythms, lots of cool like Maiden-esque lead harmonies, and the solo on it absolutely rips too. And I have to say the production here really solid. This was mixed and mastered and produced by Scott Adkins of the band Stamping Ground, and it sounds crisp, it sounds very full. Nothing seems, well, too out front, except for, well, I mean, Danny. I'm just kind of complaining there. I'm pretty sure everyone wanted Danny out front that's a longtime fan of this band.
Definitely. This is his band for the most part. You know,
it is.
The music is made to put his voice on top. Once again, it's just that one damn paintbrush. I'm not a fan of that stroke.
And it's weird because he'll like layer it and try to like harmonize with it. Like there's points where he's just doing like his more like, you know, raspy, groaned spoken word and, you know, trying to like carry a little bit of a tune, and then out of nowhere in the background you're like a fucking pterodactyl swooped into the fucking studio. Why? I don't get that. Like that is like the one register that, you know, it just needs to be just stripped from his vocal cords.
It's his signature thing, though.
It fucking is. I will say that as, you know, like lavish and, you know, very intricate and like very dynamic in terms of the songwriting like this album gets, at certain points it gets to be too much. White Hellebore, well, I thought it like kicked off like very well. Like, you know, cold tremolos, blasts, you get into a D beat, some solid breakdown groove. Like, all right, these are going to be like the main riffs you're hearing. You know, that's pretty solid. That's a good foundation. And then we flip to a fucking disco beat, and Danny starts shrieking, and we're like, dude, what happened? This song sounds like 4 different songs or sections from 4 different songs that they kind of just stitched together. And it transitions so damn quickly to the point where whatever comes up next, like by the time you actually kind of get a chance to like absorb it, it's already fucked off.
It's weird almost. It's in a sense, it's almost like a couple different songs that a DJ just kind of cut and pasted together as you go through. For me, there was a couple tracks that really stood out, and I will say that I felt like the closing track was one of the standout tracks of the album. When Misery Was a Stranger, just right off the rip, the guitars and drums just start carrying the track. They bring back in the female vocal. This kind of is almost like You Are My Nautilus in the sense where they try to bring back a couple different flavors and make this like another epic masterpiece to close out the album, and I thought they did a decent job of that, to be honest. I thought it was a pretty good closer.
You know, a lot of dissonant riffs to start off. It has a very sinister energy, you know, and then it gets right into like machine gun thrash riffs. There's some blackened moments in there too. Like this one's a really solid song, and again, another one that despite it being longer, there's enough riff transitions and like, you know, changes in there that it stays pretty damn interesting, because that is kind of a baseline complaint with a good chunk of this. Like this album is almost an hour long, and I feel like at least on some of these tracks it could have been trimmed down, because honestly I feel like they're taking dramatic pauses for Danny to tell you about the things that live in his basement, or unnecessary extra atmosphere, or repeating like, you know, certain parts that, I mean, honestly didn't necessarily need repeating. There's fat to trim off of this album for sure, but for the most part I really enjoyed the music. Once again, Danny's voice, still not for me. But despite his best efforts to ruin songs, the band persevered and some of this really solid music kind of came shining through. So overall, I'm going to give us 3 stars. Honestly, a lot of this music was pretty enjoyable. A little long-winded, but there are tons of riffs on here, like legit awesome riffs. Thrash metal, heavy metal, black metal, a little bit of death metal. It's just a nice, solid riff buffet. Honestly, the songwriting, I think, is pretty solid on here, too, for the most part. Yeah, it's got its, kind of filler tracks, I would say. But for the most part, like, the tracks that are really good are legit really good. If you're a big fan of, Cradle of Filth, and I suppose Dimmu Borgir, which he was getting confused with that band. I know.
They run together to me.
Same, Hot Topic, Isle, whatever. And honestly, like some more like melodic black metal too. Like, again, there's some dissection moments on here. Legit, and they're well played. Check this album out. Honestly, pretty decent.
I got to agree. I got to give it a 3 out of 5. I felt like the songs were pretty well constructed. Sometimes a little bit long, but once again, that's just kind of part of the package, I guess. So I won't call it a riff buffet, but I'll call it a musical charcuterie board. Mm-hmm. And I felt like they did a good job bringing different styles of good metal authentically. The drums were right on track with whatever craziness the guitars were going to do. The play was excellent. The bass playing was really good. There was a moment of where the bass player gets to shine and pop through and do his little groove thing for a minute, and that was great. Vocally, Danny Filth isn't my favorite vocalist, but I thought he dialed in a really good performance, aside from those couple of vocal stylings that I am not a fan of. So, yeah, 3 out of 5. It's a solid album. If you're a fan of this band, I guarantee you're going to find things to fall in love with for sure.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you were new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They're only 99 cents. And our main feature is doing members-only live streams, which we talk about kind of whatever. Like, we might have some theme ones in the future. Maybe either that or, we'll just sit around and chit-chat, which is also fun. But memberships are the main way to support the channel now. We also still have our store, thrallsmetal.com, with our t-shirts and hats. That is linked down below in the video description. And of course, if you would like to join this channel, there's a join button down there for you to slap and tickle, spit on, I don't know, do whatever the hell you want to it. It won't complain.
We listen and we don't judge.
A little bit of judging.
And most importantly, thank you guys. Thank each and every one of you that takes the time out of your day to spend with us. We greatly appreciate it. Without your support and your love and your vittles, we could not do this and make this a thing that we bring to you all the time. And trust me when I tell you, it is an absolute pleasure to do this, and we couldn't be any more thrilled. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Yeah, you guys absolutely rule. Tons of content coming your way. So one more big thank you because of all your rulage, and we will catch you later.